Specflow tutorial part 12 binding external assemblies. In part 11 we have learned about a scenario context. So in this session we are going to learn about how to bind the external assembly. So let me start this session. Binding the external assembly, the first question is what is an external assembly? So external assembly is nothing but a project or a DLL which you add it in any other project as well. So let me flip to Visual Studio to understand binding the external assemblies. Specflow session project, and this Specflow session project we have created in the previous sessions. We have a login.feature file, and this login.feature file is having a different scenarios. And when we talk about the step definitions of these particular steps which we have written it, we have a web step. So this web step is holding all the step definitions of the steps which we have added it here inside a login.feature file. It often happens whenever we are going to write the test cases, we are going to write the test cases in a separate project, and in that project we are going to have the reference of a step definition which are present in a separate project. Whenever we are going to have the reference of the project which is carrying or which is having the step definition in another project where we have a different scenarios where we have written a different feature files which is having a steps, we are saying binding the external assemblies. Let's create a separate project and add the test cases in that particular separate project, and then we are going to have the reference of these step definitions which existed here inside a Specflow session project. To create a project, we can click on this right click and say add. We have a new project. We are going to select this unit test project because we are going to execute the test cases, and we are going to use a unit test provider which is this unit test project. It is same as we have selected for the Specflow session project. So click on next, and here we can provide the name. We are saying Specflow test, and then we are going to have inside a scene solution. Click on next. Here we are going to select a different framework. I am selecting this .NET 6.2 a long support. Click on create, and it will create a project for us which is this a Specflow test. Now we have the Specflow test project. So if you talk about a test case writing, we are going to write the test cases here inside a Specflow test. So in other words, we can say we have this particular login.feature file. So we are going to take out the login.feature file from this Specflow session, and then we are going to add this particular login.feature file here inside a Specflow.test. So let's get rid of this. We can delete it. And whenever we are talking about execution, we are going to execute it with the help of the Specflow. So if we talk about the packages, right now we have a NUnit 3 test adapter, and a NUnit analyzer asset. So let's get rid of these. We don't need it because we are going to use a Specflow NUnit. Right click on this to import a NUnit packages, and here we can say let's search for a Specflow NUnit. Select this, and when we click on this drop down, we have a different versions of a Specflow.NUnit. Whenever you are going to download a Specflow NUnit, you need to make sure that whatever the version which existed here inside a Specflow session, that we need to select it. Right now we have the Specflow NUnit which is this 4.0.7 which is the beta version. So let's commit here and select this. We have the 4.7 beta version as well. So click on install, and it will install a NuGet package for us. Click on OK, click accept, and when we commit here inside particular project, we can see we have a Specflow NUnit. So it is having a different other packages as well related to a NUnit, Specflow, and a Specflow tools MS build generation. Specflow test project is now having a NuGet package which is this Specflow NUnit, and when we talk about scenarios which is also existed here inside a login.feature file. So let's do one thing. Let's have a build first. Build successful, and we are getting all the step definitions purple in color because they don't have a corresponding step definitions. When we talk about a corresponding step definitions, we have the corresponding step definitions here inside a Specflow session. But if you talk about this particular Specflow test, we don't have any reference of these step definitions which we have added. So whenever you are going to have the reference of any other project with respect to the step definition in a second project, then you need to have the reference of this Specflow session project here inside this Specflow test project. To have the reference, we can right click on the project, add project references, and here we can find a Specflow session project. So select this and click on OK. Now we have the reference of this Specflow session project here inside a project inside this particular Specflow test project. So we also need to do another part which is related to a specflow.json file. We need to have the specflow.json file here inside a Specflow test. To have the specflow.json file, we can say right click, add new items, select a Specflow, and here we have a configuration file which is this Specflow configuration file. Here we need to provide the name. We need to provide the name as a specflow.json file, otherwise it will not work. So click on add. Now we have the specflow.json file here inside a Specflow test project as well as we have the specflow.json file here inside a Specflow session project. So let's do one thing. Let's copy this language as well. So if it commit here inside a specflow.json file of this Specflow, let's paste it. We are going to add a one property which is this step assembly. So inside this step assembly, this is of a array list, we are going to add a object, and that object is saying it is of a assembly. So assembly is nothing but a name of the project, which is this a Specflow session project. Whenever you want to have the reference of a step definitions, those exist in any other project. And here if you talk about the step definitions, we have the web steps here inside a Specflow session project. So if we want to have the access of these step definitions inside a second project, which is this Specflow test, then we need to provide the name of the project, which is this a Specflow session project here inside the step assemblies inside assemblies. We can say Specflow session. We have added the name of the project, which is this Specflow session project, and this Specflow session project is having the step definition. In case if you have a two project which is having a different step definition and you want to have the reference of both the project here inside a Specflow test project, then you need to add another object, and here we need to provide a name of the second project. In this way, whatever the assemblies, whatever the step definitions exist in the different assemblies, those are going to have the reference here inside a Specflow test project. Right now we are going to have the reference of only a single project. So let's have a rebuild here. Build successful. So if we commit here inside a login.feature file, now we can see all the steps have a corresponding step definitions. These steps are not purple in color. So if we say right click, go to definitions, we can see we have moved it here inside the web steps, and this web step existed here inside a Specflow session project. To have or to get all the things here inside a login.feature file inside this particular Specflow test, what we did it, we have the reference of this Specflow session project here inside a Specflow test, and we have also added a specflow.json file, and inside the specflow.json file we have added a one property which is this step assemblies, and inside the step assemblies we have added another field which is this assembly, and we have provided the name of the project. We also need to do one more thing related to whenever you add a specflow.json file, you need to do right click, go to properties, and here instead of having a do not copy, we need to select a copy always. Right now we have three options: do not copy, copy always, copy if newer, but we are going to select a copy always. So whenever we are going to have the build of this particular project, it is going to copy this specflow.json file to the output folder. So if we commit here now, let's have a rebuild one more time. We have Control S to save the information. So now whenever you want to run the test cases, commit here in the test explorer, and right now we have the test cases related to a Specflow test. So we can select this, right click, and say run. So it is going to invoke a browser and it is going to run the test cases with login with valid credentials, and if we can see, it has invoked the browser and logged in inside that particular test case or that particular website as well. That's it in this session.